Lawn Landscape had a poll out this year, and they said 56% of lawn care companies said that quality labor was their number one concern. So there's not enough quality labor out there. It's hard to find them. It's hard to keep them, and it's hard to pay them. And so I'd be surprised if there wasn't somebody on the phone that didn't agree with that. Certainly, it's been a challenge growing our business with Holganix, and it was a challenge in growing my other two businesses. And so, let's talk about that for a second. People say, what am you in the B2B business, so business selling to business, or are you in the B2C business, business selling to consumer? And so some people on the phone are probably selling to commercial, selling to large operations, selling to commercial lawn care. Some of you are selling to residential, so you're selling to the homeowners. But it really doesn't matter whether you're B2B or B2C. Every single person that's in business that's trying to add customers is really in the P2P business, which is people to people. So it's really people selling people. And so if you don't get the people part right, you can have the best sales program, the best sales strategy, the best marketing campaign. If you don't have the people component right, it's all going to fall apart at some point. We've got to focus on people. And when I say focus on people, we're going to just cover very briefly, how do we empower our employees? And the millennial workforce today, you hear people frequently will complain about the millennial worker. They're hard to manage, they're hard to motivate. They want to be empowered. They don't want to be told what to do like a machine. They want to have some autonomy, and they want to know what the goal is, and they want to be empowered to reach that goal. If you can, I don't care if you're millennial or any other generation, if you can empower your people, you'll get more out of them, and they'll be happier and more effective for you. And then how do we increase efficiency by measuring success? It's not enough to just say, do a good job, do your best. You have to measure your results. What gets measured gets improved. So, Katie, why don't you take us to the next slide here? So this goes into the empowering the employee. This was one of my companies that we built and sold. We sold this company to ChemLawn, and we grew this company. We went 2 million one year, 5 million the next year, 10 million. So 2 million, 5 million, 8 million, 10 million. So over 4 years, we grew from 2 million to $10 million. And you can see here, this is midway through that growth, and you can see the team we have there. And so, it was really important to us to have that team working together to reach our goals and work efficiently, because that many people, if things are off track a little bit, that certainly eats up a lot of payroll real quickly. And so at the same time, if you can get that many people focused in the same direction, doing the same thing and doing it all right, it can be very, very effective. So we had our Dream On initiative, is what we called it. And, we had big goals in the company to, go from 2 million to 5 million, 5 million to 8 million. They were big, lofty goals. And, we could get our people excited about that goal. We could pay them commissions to help us reach that goal. But ultimately, what we found was that to really empower our team to reach the goal, it was this Dream On initiative. And what we decided to do is we went to our people and we said, look, we want to help you reach your goals, whatever your personal goals are. Each person had their own goal plan. We brought in a consultant that was a goal setting consultant that helped people set goals and reach goals. And we ran seminars every month, and all the employees were invited to that seminar every month. And at that seminar, they're encouraged to set their goals and to create a plan to reach their goals. All the managers knew what the goals were of the people that worked for them. And so what they could do is they could say, listen, at Happy Lawn, we want to help you reach your goals, but in order to do that, we need you to help us reach our goals. So what we were able to do was enroll the employee into realizing that by helping the company reach its goals, that they could get bonuses and commissions and extra production bonuses and what have you, which would help them reach their goals. And so we tied it all together. And, I can remember, there was a Hispanic guy that had worked for us who came up through one of the visa programs, and his goal was to own a house. And, we helped him sit down and write the plan to own that house. And sure enough, within a year, he was able to buy a house for his family, and they still live in that house today. We had another young guy that had just kind of dropped out of college to work for us running a truck, and his goal is to have a BMW M3. And we showed him what he needed to do from production perspective and from a sales perspective to earn enough money to buy a BMW M3, and that's what he did. And so when you get the employees to really think through what their goals are, and you can help them realize that their portion of helping the company reach its goals can directly tie to their own goals, frequently we can get much higher level of commitment and productivity and engagement out of our employees. And by the way, they stick with you longer. They're happier. They're excited to come to work. They're excited to work on Saturdays. And they're able to do all this simply because they want to reach their own goals. And look, I'm not going to tell you that every single person it's going to work perfectly for. But what I will tell you is when we did this, we certainly engaged more than half of the company in that goal setting program, and more than half the company, did move towards their personal goals and did so by helping the company reach its goals. And so it was really tremendous for us. And I think it was one of the driving strategies that helped us go from 2 million to 5 million to 8 million to 10 million in revenue. And to do so while having not just chaos, but having a really engaged, fun, exciting workforce. So that's our Dream On initiative. And by the way, I stole that initiative. I should say I got it through R&D, which is rip off and duplicate. And I encourage all of you, if this idea excites you, go ahead and R&D it from me. But I took it from a guy who I met, who's a friend of mine named John Ratliff, who had a company that had a phone center. They answered phones for plumbers and doctors and people that couldn't be in their offices, and a lot of kind of frontline labor that was making minimum wage or just above. And he had a challenge motivating, empowering, and keeping employees because it was kind of a tough job. It wasn't some place that people dreamt about working necessarily. And so he created this Dream On initiative. And so I encourage you to kind of write that email address down, or actually Katie will send it to you after the webinar. You don't have to think about writing it down, but I want you to go to YouTube and take a look at his 7-minute video where he explains his Dream On initiative and how it made an impact in their business. And he grew the company tremendously, and he credits that Dream On initiative as doing so. So here's an example in the lawn care space, and somebody that really was able to grow his business. And this is one of our customers, Jonathan Rigsby, down in North Carolina market, sort of outside of Greensboro, North Carolina area. And he's got a company called Growing Green. We just did a webinar with him, by the way, about a month ago. If you're interested in learning more about his business, Katie can send you the webinar on that as well. But Jonathan made a big deal in his webinar about talking about he's grown a very nice business over the last 10 or 15 years. And he really was excited about getting his revenue per truck to be as high as he possibly could. And obviously, I think we'd all like our revenue per truck to go up as much as possible, but it's one thing to be interested in getting your revenue per truck to go up. It's another thing to be committed to getting your revenue per truck to go up. And Jonathan decided to be committed. And so what he did, and by the way, the reason he wanted his revenue per truck to go up is because he wanted to make more profit for his company. But more importantly than that, for him, is it allowed him to hire a better quality technician, pay that technician a higher rate, and ultimately keep those technicians over a long period of time. Because if you can get his revenue per truck up, think about it, your profit per truck goes up. If your profit per truck goes up, then you can afford to pay higher labor rates than your competition. So that will pretty much guarantee you're going to get a good crop of employees compared to your competition. And so he got focused on revenue per truck. And he grew it by 60% over the course of about 5 or 6 years. And at the same time, he reduced his cancel rate from 19% to 15%. So, obviously, if we have a high cancel rate, that's going to be one of the biggest negatives to growing our business is a high cancel rate. We can add lots of customers, but if we can't keep them, we got to sell twice as hard just to kind of stay in the same place. But driving cancel rates is really important, driving them down. So here, Jonathan increased his revenue per truck while driving his cancel rate down. How did he do it? Well, cliff note, and again, we have the webinar if you want to learn more, but a very quick cliff note is he invested in equipment. So he made the most efficient trucks that he could make. The trucks are set up to do multiple applications. So they have he's mostly liquid. So he has multiple tanks with multiple hose reels on each truck. So he can go out and do a fertilizer weed control application. He can do a perimeter pest control application. He can do a tree and shrub application. So he can do multiple services every time that truck stops. So if you think about it, there's a lot of windshield time involved in just getting your truck to the customer's house. But once you get that truck to the customer's house, you might as well do as many services as you possibly can while you're there. This way, we don't have to repeat that windshield time to go do the other services. But to do that, he had to invest in his truck. So there was an investment up front to make that happen. Once he was able to get the trucks to be more efficient, then he was able to get the profit back by driving efficiency, and to get more revenue per truck, more profit per truck. He then took a piece of those profits and invested into paying his people higher rates. He kept his technicians a lot longer. I think in his webinar, he tells us that his average technician stays with him something like 7 or 8 years, which is, a lot longer than I think a lot of us see with a lot of our lawn care companies. And he also, because he has the same technician, he keeps the same technician on the same routes year over year. So they really get to know their routes. They get to know their customers. They get to know their concerns with those specific lawns. And that also drives efficiency. The technicians also become a local representative of the company in that neighborhood because they're there every single month. They get to know the neighbors. They get to upsell and get neighbors of existing customers, which drives density. And what do you think happens when you drive customer density? Our revenue goes up. Our revenue per truck goes up. So first he invested in the equipment, then he invested in the people, and then he was able to drive density of customer base. All of those things led to much more revenue per truck and a reduced cancel rate, which was a holy grail for him. So it's one thing to empower our employees. It's one thing to get them excited. It's one thing to give them all the equipment so they can do a great job. But it's not enough. You have to measure what they do every day. I think most of our employees have good intentions, but if we don't measure their results, we can't really manage them and we can't direct them to do better. So every single employee should have a KPI. A KPI is a key performance indicator. So if it's a production-oriented employee that's going out and doing lawns every day, their KPI should be how much revenue can they do per day. What's their cancel rate in their route? How much revenue can they do per hour? You can look at their material usage per square foot. These are all KPIs you can look at for a production-oriented person. If it's a sales-oriented person, obviously we want to focus on how many sales they can make per day, but also how well priced and how profitable are those sales. What's the cancel rate for the salespeople as well? Because if they don't sell it right, it's going to cancel. So looking at long-term retention rates for your salespeople is another KPI. And so all of these things kind of tie back to managing our people and understanding how to keep them accountable and how to know who was accountable for what functions in the company. And that takes us to our FACE exercise. So this FACE exercise comes right out of the Vern Harnish book. And you guys can see this tool that we have here, which talks about how to measure and how to get KPIs for each one of our people. And so FACE stands for Function Accountability Chart. And you can see the kind of acronym in that orange headline at the top. So that's where that FACE comes from. So on each one of these positions in the company, and by the way, this is kind of generic, so you can edit for the positions that are in your company. You don't have to have every one of these positions in your company. But if you look at head of company, marketing, sales, operations, what have you, customer advocacy, that would basically be like customer service. Or anybody that's going to be interfacing with the customer on a daily basis. And so, but you can use any terms you want for the functions within your company. And then you want to look at, who's accountable to that role. And it might sound really simple. Oh, who's accountable for head of company? Well, yeah, that's the owner of the company. But what if you have 2 partners or 3 partners? Who's really head of the company? One person might be an equal partner, but somebody else is, but it might not be. They both run the company equally. So that's not always as simple as you think. And when you look at sales, who's accountable for sales? Well, if our entire organization does sales and production, and nobody's accountable for sales, but we're all accountable for sales, if nobody's accountable, if everybody's accountable, I should say, then nobody's accountable. You need to have a single person that is your chief revenue officer. It doesn't mean that the entire organization doesn't sell, but there's one person that's in charge of driving sales, paying attention to sales, and they're accountable for growing sales. And they then get the organization responsible for helping to drive sales. So there's a difference between accountability and sales. Um, and so if you think about being accountable to a role, then that means it's the buck stops with you. It doesn't mean you do all the sales. It means you're the one that accounts for the sales, measures the sales, makes sure that sales are happening and make sure sales is growing. You then get other people in the company to help you with sales. That means many people can be responsible for making sales. Only one person in the company is accountable for sales. And that's true for each one of these functions. And cancels would be another function. So if you have one person that's in charge of or accountable for sales, you should have another person that's accountable for cancels. And so one person in the company measures cancels every single day. They become obsessed about reducing cancel rates. And that person is the champion of cancels. That does not mean that that person personally saves every single cancel that comes through the door. That doesn't mean they're responsible for all the cancels. That means that person is accountable. That means that person counts whether we're getting a reduction in cancels or whether our cancels are escalating. And so if you get one person focused on each one of these functions, then they can recruit many people in the company to help be responsible for driving cancel rates down. And so if you can think through the business that way, you can really drive accountability through the whole organization.